Hey guys, welcome to the Depression Journal Part 2. I was thinking about this. I am going to almost commit to not pushing the stop button and starting all over if I don't think what I'm saying is coming out eloquently enough or like I'm ever eloquent. That's what you're all thinking. I heard it. I heard what you were thinking. But I really do want this to be as raw as it could possibly be. So let me jump right into this. Like, I'm really, really happy right now. And I think happiness for folks that struggle with depression is a little bit different than what the world sees as happiness. And I've talked to somebody else who struggled with depression, and they've encountered the same sort of dilemma. Like, I, at one point, when I felt happy, thought that I was potentially bipolar because the happiness just felt so good. And I was just like, daggum. Like, am I going on these major pendulum swings of major depression and then major happiness, thinking that I was bipolar? And I did mention that to a doctor at one point, and he eliminated that as a possibility after he asked further questions. But the reason being, and again, when I talk about depression, mental illness, I never mean to come across like I have all the answers and I've got it figured out. This is all investigative, exploratory sort of talk. It's like what I think. And I'm always open to pushback and discussion, although sometimes it can be offensive when someone who doesn't struggle with depression can offer sorts of suggestions or comments when in my position, I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. And honestly, I shouldn't be offended. Of course, they don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, jumping right back to the conversation I had with somebody else who was struggling with depression, is she basically articulated what I think is what I'm experiencing right now, and that is I spent so much of my life either depressed or just kind of at a numb place in my heart and in my mind. You can almost feel it physiologically, that when I feel this lifted and this free and outside of the constraints of depression, I just feel like that is such a relief. In fact, I remember, and it's super interesting, I'll go off on a tangent real quick. With antidepressants, I actually got on one medication, didn't work, had to get on another. Increased the dosage of that one a little bit, didn't work, had to get on another. And keep in mind that when you go off a medicine and get on another one, you have to taper yourself off slowly. So it's the most frustrating thing when you give up on a medication, because you're like, oh gosh, now I know it's not going to work, and now I have to taper off. So that's going to take a couple weeks. Then it'll take another and you're just like, I can't do another month of this depression. Well, I went through a solid 2 years of that trial and error, and I think I'm being pretty conservative with the 2-year mark. It was probably more like 3 or 4. But I'll never forget, I was in my apartment in Rock Hill, South Carolina, I think a first-year teacher, and I tried Paxil for the first time. And out of nowhere, maybe like 10 days into the thing, it worked. Like, I could not believe how I felt. It was almost like if you could think of yourself in a house that is full of smoke, and you're coughing and you're in anguish and you're thinking you're going to die, and then all of a sudden at the snap of a finger the smoke is gone and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like in a different world. It just was so exhilarating, unbelievably exhilarating. And the next day wasn't like that, and I'm thinking, oh, it'll come back around. Never did. Paxil never really worked for me, except that like one day. And I think that's the tough thing that I've been going back and forth on, is the difference between like unhappiness and depression. listen to some podcasts on depression and some experts in the field. They can articulate it a lot clearer than I can, but I just think that depression is in its own category, and maybe it's just immense unhappiness compounded over long periods of time, or the effects that unhappiness or trauma has on a brain after a long period of time. I don't know. I just know I personally, Joey Svensson, knows the difference between unhappiness and depression. Unhappiness is kind of like being in a room that's not full of smoke, but maybe I have like a stomach ache and I'm sad, but at least I can see, at least I'm not coughing, at least the room is not full of smoke. Whereas with depression, and this is kind of maybe a lame analogy, but with depression, I can't see, I can't stop coughing, I can't feel my way around the stomach ache, I can't take Tums, I can't correct my thoughts. It's like I'm stuck in this place. So that's enough of me rambling. For those of you that listen to 6 minutes of this, you either struggle with depression or you're just a big fan of Joey Svensson, I guess. But until Volume 3, thanks for listening to Depression Journal Episode 2.